Welcome to the Devhouse Agency Podcast, your window into the metaverse. I am Jim Welch, your host, and today my co-host is Christian Black.
Hello there.
So today we have as our guest Storm Hughes, who we'll be talking with in a little bit. But today we have something a little different. We're going to dive right into our actual segment that is two segments in one. So we found gear that was also news. So let's check out some gear. So today's gear bit is the PSVR 2, which is the not the most innovative name, but in line with PlayStation's brand, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, the PS4, the PS5, the VR2, they announced it at CES, and I thought there was like this big like build up. So the official name we announced for the PlayStation VR2 is the PSVR 2, and then like all the iPads and cameras went up, which was kind of funny, but.
Yep.
But here, if you're watching us on YouTube, we have up on our screen kind of a breakdown between the different devices, different kind of popular headsets that are out there right now for virtual reality. Of course, Oculus is sort of the showrunner right now, and there's a lot of Meta Oculus headsets out in the world. But PSVR 2, as we're looking over this, I mean, it's pretty strong. I mean, what's your impression on this, Christian, as you look over it?
Personally, I like the higher resolution per eye than anything else. For me, that's the biggest blocker in VR. I actually found out yesterday that you have to wear glasses in VR because if you're short-sighted, everything is still blurry anyway. So for years, I have had everything blurry in VR.
And you're just like, this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I thought it was that bad. I got on glasses and it was about 50% better,
Yeah.
but I'd love to see it actually crisp.
Right. Yeah. And I remember early days of VR, it was very what they would call screen door effect, where you would see like basically the pixels, and it's much better now. But so so as a reference point, if you're not seeing the visuals with us here, the Oculus Quest was about 1800 by 1900 as far as per eye resolution. The PSVR 2 is about 2K, so 2000 by 2040 per eye, which isn't a massive jump, but it is an increase. Compared to the previous generation, though, it's about double. So if you had a PSVR 1 and you're familiar with that, you're looking at about double the resolution, which will be noticeable.
Yep.
You'll be able to appreciate that. It's interesting, though, it is tethered still, even though it has inside out cameras. So it doesn't have towers that see you or a PlayStation Eye camera. It has built-in cameras, but it still is tethered into the PSVR. Another interesting thing I noticed is it has a little SD card slot. And because it's tethered, I'm curious why they've chosen to have like a portable memory. So there's still some questions I have.
I think the portable memory was a USB slot, and I think that was a Rumble Pack expansion look like.
Okay, interesting.
From the video that we're about to see at least.
Yeah, let's put on the video and we can start looking at some of the features. But it seems very a strong competitor stats-wise to what's out on the market currently.
Yep.
And so there was a CES announcement video, which was mostly just kind of a guy on stage talking and building it up, but I particularly like the video we're about to watch now, which is more of their kind of sizzle reel. It's a little more fun to watch, but we'll see some of the the hardware itself looks nice. I mean, I think it's visually appealing. It has the IPD, the interpupillary distance adjustments, so you can tweak how close the eye holes are, so to speak. But yeah, so I think some of I actually really like the band design with the ports on the band. I think that's kind of nice as long as your band doesn't break.
Yeah.
They
I like the top support going
Yeah.
across instead of vertical, or with your or oriented with the forward of your head.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And there's the inside out cameras, so you can actually do the tracking and in theory hand tracking. And something we'll see here shortly is, here's the IPD adjustment, is it has eye tracking, which is the Quest doesn't have.
Yeah.
There were some other headsets I used a long time ago that had some eye tracking, and conceptually it's really cool. if you write software that takes advantage of it.
So I think this might catch on a little more than other VR headsets with eye tracking because it's going to be explicitly for the PS5. So there will be like first or third party studios making games only for this headset, so they'll be able
Right.
to use that.
Yeah, there's something about like proprietary technology that can help with sort of, well, we know what our customer
Yep.
has, so we can only develop
Yep.
that, which helps. The controllers look pretty cool. I don't know, they're a little different. They don't have the stock.
I
Yeah,
like that the lack of a traditional like controller grip
yeah.
seems like it fits the hand a little more naturally.
It's almost, and that's just cool looking. The new aim controller, I don't know, looks like
Yeah,
something out
I
of
remember the
Halo or
light gun
something.
from Nintendo.
Yeah, it's cool looking. Like I kind of want one just because I think they did a good job with the design. You can also flip up the VR visor, which is
Oh, thank
huge.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Finally.
why has that not always been a thing? Because you're almost always like around either someone, or you hear a noise and you're like, oh, what's that? And you have to take off the headset.
Or even as a developer, you're constantly
Yes.
taking the headset off, looking at a code, and then putting the headset back on and looping that ad infinitum.
Yeah, yeah, it can be really annoying, especially if you're wearing a hat, and it
Yep.
becomes really obnoxious. Yeah. So, but anyway, PSVR 2, it's been announced. It looks like they're investing in what they think will be continued interest in VR. So cool stuff. So let's with that, let's jump into our Dev Abomination for today. So our Dev Abomination today, Mega Benny. What do we want to call?
It's not just Benny, he's the only one with a prominent face.
Yeah. So therefore he becomes the hero, I feel like.
I do suppose, since he takes up like the entirety middle of the image.
Yeah, my eye goes there as his head. That's his
Yep.
face. So this is from, so we have a game called Lost in Paracosm that's in development, and so we're making some kind of 3D figurines with faces and different poses, and think like the amiibos, like
Yep.
that sort of similar concept. And so working through trying to make all the different poses on all the different characters, we resulted in Mega Benny here, which I get like Akira vibes from it. I don't
A
know.
little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah, just like arms coming out, extra weird bits. But yeah, so he won't look like that when he's done. We actually should. I think we're targeting this week to have like a small set that we might share on social media.
Yep.
So we'll see like a polished version of what we're looking at here as a silly thing pretty soon. So cool. All right. Well, farewell, Mega Benny. I think with that, we'll intro our guest today, which is Storm Hughes, and our good buddy Shay behind the desk can pull up Mr. Hughes here. If you pause really quick, you might have seen my email, which is great. You can hack all my life. What's up, man? Hey, Storm.
How's it going?
It's going
Hey there.
good.
Glad to be on.
So
Yeah.
Storm used to actually work for Devhouse, which is fun. I think you're our first former Devhouse person on the show, but now you're doing a lot of other cool stuff. And before you joined Devhouse, you did cool stuff. So I guess share a bit about who you are, what you do, that kind of thing.
Yeah, appreciate it. So, yeah, my name's Storm Hughes. I'm a game developer currently located in Dallas. I've been making games for like 5, 6 years now. Doing the old, started off with like pixel art, but as any kind of developer learns, you can make a bunch of art, but it doesn't do computer stuff if you don't make it. So you have to learn to program, and that's kind of kickstarted my journey into learning computer programming and kind of creating digital spaces and, making video games.
Yeah, and you were initially using it wasn't Unity or Unreal. I'm blanking on the
I'm
software.
gonna guess
It's
Game
Game
Maker.
Maker too.
Game Maker. Yeah. Yeah. Do you
Good old
still find
classic
playing with
Game
that
Maker.
at all these days, or have you moved on with
Mm, Yeah, no, Game Maker is nice. It's neat, but yeah, no, I'm definitely stuck in C# land for the foreseeable future. And then specifically Unity for the time being. Maybe if Unreal they had a mega grant for like Unreal support with C# or .NET support. So maybe if Unreal lets me use C# in its engine, I'll try it. But I'm
Right.
pretty stuck with C# and Unity for now, which
Yeah.
is people have complaints, but I like it. It's fun.
Yeah, we like
It
Unity.
works.
Yeah. I think Unreal is nice where it has the blueprints and you can kind of connect things, and as a designer, I think it's a little more friendly than Unity. But once you're used to writing scripts in Unity, it's really hard to go in and be like, well, you can in Unreal, but you got to write C++, and that's just, as a C# developer, that's daunting and not as
Yeah.
fun. So,
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think, especially recently, my journey of like becoming a better Unity developer involves like understanding the tool set a lot more and knowing what's going on. Even like, I actually listen to a lot of podcasts by C++ game engine developers, despite having no interest in making one. Because I like to learn their lessons, but people get very opinionated and specific on like game engine architecture. But what's fascinating is how generic game engine architecture really informs game design, and the kind of the digital spaces that we see are all modeled after whatever these engines give us.
right,
They Unity is full of like, and even learning like I learned game design and development from Unity, like in the context of Unity. And then you go to other engines and you're like, oh, you don't have to have game objects for data to run. Like I didn't know you could even have that. Or like every game object in Unity has a transform, and so just overhead with 3D matrix transforms, and it's just like I want to make video games. Why why is all this here? But
right. Well, it's
um
it's interesting because, yeah, I mean, really, if you look at a game that's out there, you can often tell, especially if it's like an indie game, if it was an Unreal or
mhm.
a Unity, just because, to what you said, it's like people kind of design around that tool, and it tends to give it a flavor that you can detect, so to
Yep.
speak.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's the joke of like, we people often would say that they could identify Unity games, but really
Yep.
that's just because of Unity's model with the splash screen.
Mm,
But I feel like anybody
Nice.
can tell an Unreal game almost immediately from
Yep.
like the texture. Like the render tech Unreal has is very specific. But they've done a really good job, Unreal has, of like making it good by default. And so therefore like a lot of cinema, a lot of like television productions use Unreal because it has this like Marvel-ish texture to
Yeah.
it. It's got like really high saturated, really like nice soft PBR. Um, and which is why it's like a mass adoptive tool.
right,
But it's interesting because I think, when we talk about metaverse stuff, I think the most similar thing to the metaverse that exists already, like standalone, was like VR chat, digital spaces that people can occupy, create, customize, share, host, and exist in, and create communities in. But all that's run through Unity. And then even then, VR chat is known for stylistic, like a lack of stylistic cohesion.
Yeah.
VR chat's really
It's pretty
tonally like
laissez-faire.
clashing.
right.
Yeah, and so like I'm always curious when people want to do metaverse stuff and use these tools. If there's some metaverse content that is Unity based, you get like a lot of freedom there to render. But if it's a lot of Unreal based metaverse content, then it looks very Unreal-ish. Um, and so I'm always curious, like when people want to see the metaverse, like do you want to see something that is stylistically liberated, like people doing whatever they want with the content, or do you want to have a cohesive like aesthetic?
Right. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about sort of user content. It's like it's linear versus sort of generated. It's like a linear story can be very powerful, but it's on rails, and then
Yeah.
a user generated story, maybe it's kind of not very evocative, but now it's super dynamic and it can be whatever you want. And I think that's true with just content in general. The more custom it is, like, hey, we built these maps and these maps are really well defined, and if you walk around that corner you have this moment, and oh, you walk into the valley and it feels this certain way, you can craft that, which I think is powerful.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think there's a better or worse, but they both have kind of their place.
It's a taste thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and almost like a mood too, like what do you, or I mean, yeah, a taste, like what are you feeling that week,
Yep.
what do you want to play
Yep.
today?
Yeah.
As I was younger, I loved super expansive spaces and things that I could really like become my own, because I couldn't express myself as a child as much. And so as I've gotten older, where my life is pretty much mostly in my control, now I want crafted experiences handed to me so I can say, okay, like I just want to, I do enough thinking during the day, give me something great. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. Um,
And I think too, like part of the pipe dream of the metaverse is like options.
yeah,
Just you
Oh
have
yeah.
those options. Some parts can be handmade by children. Even the tools can be simplified enough to allow kids to kind of create spaces for each other, and then some can be master crafted like artworks by known developers with stylistic cohesion and all that stuff. So
So
it's
Roblox.
it's a neat idea for
Roblox,
sure.
yeah. Roblox is so strange.
Yeah.
That's like a soapbox I could go on about. But I think one of the main things we wanted to kind of discuss with you today, Storm, is I think there's in the world, there's people that are like metaverse super cool and like, oh, this is stupid. I hate it. Oh, Meta slash Facebook is pioneering this or leading the way. I especially hate it. But we see that I think paralleled in game development communities as well as like gamer
Right.
communities. Christian, what's your experience in that? Have you seen that as well, that there's like a distaste or a concern about the space?
Um, my Twitter feed kind of flows back and forth on that actually, where I have like some accounts that I follow are pretty for it and are excited about like the stuff they create, and then I follow other developers that just don't care for it at all.
Sure.
It's
Have
just
you
it's
have
a
you found
mixed
a
bag for
pattern
sure.
of like certain types of people or identifiable, like, oh, this type of person probably won't like it?
I find that most people that consider themselves the auteur type are more into it than those that are not.
Interesting. Okay. What's been your experience, Storm? How do you kind of see the landscape?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think off the bat, it metaverse type stuff gets lumped in with NFT
Hmm.
stuff in that they're both like pioneered technologies, and also spaces for money. I know that a lot of like private investing firms are dumping money into like technology companies for both kinds of tech stacks because there's a space to innovate, and wherever there's innovation, people want to follow with money.
Hmm.
And so people can kind of get wrapped up in both like NFTs and metaverse. Let's make both. Let's do either or. And while I have really, I really dislike NFT stuff, for environmental conservation reasons. But people tend to apply that critique to metaverse for some reason. I don't really see a need to critique like because NFT stuff is bad because it's lighting warehouses of GPUs on fire to make some funky tokens. But metaverse is, in my opinion, not like under. It should not be under the same critiques, though. It should have its own.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. I mean,
and even then, sensationalism is a big issue
sure.
with metaverse stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, that's the big problem I see, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned sort of like putting things under the same umbrella, and I think metaverse, even people just assuming VR, like there's a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I don't want to like live in a VR headset or virtual world," and it's not necessarily that. It can be that. That's one avenue or one potential path, but I mean, there's a lot of other ideation that's more about like, well, how do we integrate, your real world with elements, that are digital, and
Right.
it's really about that like digital layer that's like on top and in parallel. Right now we hop in a video game, we mess around, we have fun, we open an app to order pizza. Like we already are interacting with digital spaces, but it's like very isolated. These like little kind of one-off incidents, and
Mhm.
really we want like a constant, or the idea of the metaverse is that layer where like there's your personality, there's your avatar in this space that you can do lots of stuff in, and it almost runs parallel to your life, and you can be
Yeah.
in it as much as you want, so it's
I-
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even in like core concept, right? Like you don't need VR, you don't necessarily even need AR to do the metaverse, right?
Right.
I think the big
Yeah.
thing is internet happened, and then we have all these companies that kind of make isolated data like cubes of like here on Facebook you have Facebook data, here on YouTube you have YouTube data, here on Twitter you have Twitter data, and we're beginning to have like metaverse light scenarios where like you can use your Google login to log into a lot of other services. We no longer
Right.
have to create isolated pillars of like my data over here, my data over here. And so we're already kind of creating like, hey, you can have a singular account that you can share anywhere. um you know and we don't have like Steam integration for Google, but I think that one of the fantasies I think with metaverse is to be able to take your data, your progression, your created content from one platform, one space to another. And from a tech perspective, it's just like API integration, really. But I think from like a usability standpoint, that's like like an amazing time. Imagine no longer having to create accounts or usernames or set something up, any no more like time to log in. What was my password? I forget. It's just we have all of that stuff on your person, and you can just take it with you, and that's really cool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of when I did audio for a living. Pro Tools and other companies use something called an Eyelock, where it's like you put all your licenses on this little thumb drive, and all of
Mm,
your plugins just kind of live on that. And some people didn't like it, but what was neat is you could go to someone else's studio, plug your Eyelock in, and instantly you have access to all your software. And so it's kind of cool to have like that token, so to speak, the physical object that represented all of your purchases and your equipment that you could then go use elsewhere.
yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I like kind of the exploration of like how do we use the space as far as like a lot of us do, or I think all three of us do, like a lot of indie development and exploration into making little games that aren't necessarily commercially viable or intent to make money. Do you see, Christian, a space for indie developers who maybe are less focused on the monetization of their game to be a part of the metaverse? Like, is this can they be a part of the conversation, or is the metaverse really about the monetization?
Um, I think for corporations, it's definitely about the monetization, but I definitely think they're going to be creators who are curious about what they're able to create in the metaverse, and we'll find some cool things through there. It just has to be like someone has to make something cool there first, and then the
Right.
rest will follow.
Sure. What I mean, a lot of what you were talking about, Storm, is like interoperability. Like, how do I use my avatar, let's say, in multiple cases? Like, how do we get the
Right.
indie community to maybe start exploring this space together since it's so divided? Like, it's not like big, huge companies that can have a meeting and decide. It's thousands of small indie developers.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think even the first part, like, metaverse stuff is new. And so it's expensive to interact with. And so the people who invest the time to like grasp these tools or tend to be big companies funding, teams to do this. And so the result is we see like um, software, like we see examples of like new ways to shop. Here's what Walmart would look like in the metaverse.
Yeah.
And that alone is like reminder, like, don't forget this is the internet. That clip it went around recently about like
Mm,
the Walmart VR. That's like really old, and
right.
that's not a new thing they're working on. That was an old tech demo for VR, so be mindful of the information you're saying. But yeah, I think Christian's right. I think devs need examples of, hey, just because you see on Twitter kind of old tech demos of shopping simulators does not mean that the technology that we're making is exclusive to shopping simulators.
Yep.
There's a lot of space to pioneer interactivity, to pioneer ways to shape technology uh, that haven't been done yet. And that's really freeing. I don't know how though. I mean, a good example is to provide them with devs with tools. Like, hey, here are some easy to use interactive tools that you can just start making things with. Boilerplate is a good one. Just basic like projects. Though you run the risk, like with any game engine, of a cohesive aesthetic based
Hmm.
around the tools. If there are things will start to look samey if a lot of people have access to them.
Right.
So then
Well,
I
and
guess, a tool to make things look unique somehow,
right. Yeah,
with the
well, I mean,
knowledge.
you have things like Roblox, which is its own almost like mini metaverse,
Yep.
and you can go in and you can create little spaces that sometimes there's really not much to do. You run around and you can look at the space they made, and uh, you know,
Yeah.
but there's not a lot of game mechanics. It's more like, hey, I made a living room, I made this cool building, you can do a couple things. And
Right.
so it's like, yeah, we can make those, but they still eventually live in an isolated space. It's still Roblox and just Roblox. And so coming up with a way to like merge very different experiences, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I have a platform video game with a shooter with an RPG, and I want to mix all of those across some kind of interconnectivity to make them feel like they
Right.
are a metaverse. Like, how do we do that? And that's
Yeah.
unknown. I don't know.
Yeah, integration's really rough. I mean, example like Unreal, if you want to go up in Unreal, you have to increase your X value. Why? I don't know why that is the case. It's one
That's
of the only
no.
3D
Upsetting.
software that does that.
Yeah.
Ooh,
S-
really?
Yep, X
Oh,
is and it's just stuff like that of like,
oh,
I'm. I'm sure there's a decision-making factor in there some way in the engine's
Yeah,
history,
in
but it's really like
1995.
yeah, the dream is to integrate, right? To be able to integrate pieces of other spaces together into a cohesive experience,
Yeah, and
or to layer on. Oh,
with
go ahead.
with visuals too, that makes it so challenging. Like you can have a game that's so stylistically different. You want to take like Horizon Zero Dawn and then play your Minecraft character on it. Well, how does your
Yeah.
Minecraft character import to Horizon? Like it's just I have no idea. Like it wouldn't, but
Yeah.
but it's very interesting.
I think
Yeah,
the
again, and it wouldn't, right? Like it just would not.
no.
And we're also entering a phase of, I don't want to say a phase of capitalism because it's so cringy to say, but we're in a spot where like mega corporate, like parent companies own a lot of IP, and so we're getting a lot of media that is flexing the IP that they own.
Yep.
Disney's Free Guy, and just like like we got like Marvel Heroes, we got Star
Star Wars.
Wars, we got all these things together. Um, and it is, I mean, like, Ready Player One, was like a book that became a movie kind of depicting this like future where we have all these things coming together, everything you love in one place. And it's a nice dream, but I think, as developers we have to be mindful and informed that like again, you can't just take your Minecraft Steve and put it in Horizon Zero Dawn. The better an experience gets, the more specific it has to be made.
Mm.
And you can't even like take the texture of Horizon Zero Dawn characters and put them on Call of Duty models because the faces aren't going to line up. Like,
Right.
and if you wanted to, like all of that stuff, you have to have tools that like generate these assets
Yep.
for you from existing assets.
Now, that's an interesting
And
idea, though. You mentioned generating assets. So this is literally spitballing as we talk about it, but theoretically,
mhm,
someone working on Horizon Zero Dawn could make a plugin that you could run your Minecraft character through, and it generates a character based on some values. Like, oh, I see that you
right.
had, a white dude with spiky mohawk. Cool. I can create a version of that in our game that's a rough approximation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe the trick
Yeah.
is that we build our own experiences, but then we start spending more time building compatibility with other people's experiences, so we can share in something. And we have just like how people build, like, oh, you have season passes now, and that's sort of like, oh, just presumably a new AAA game is going to have a season pass. They just build that in. Maybe it's like, okay, how do we build in character importers? I would just assume avatar because that's your identity, so you want to jump around. How do we import new avatars from other games?
Yep.
And some popular
Yeah.
games can be
Yeah.
supported and smaller ones won't be.
Yeah. I mean, it's all data, right? It's just all information. And you can, as long as you architect your products well enough, there should be ways to take in data, parse it, restructure, Facebook's meta avatar information into a way that kind of integrates with your project, in a way that at least kind of is neat, right? Because then you could skip the character creation step.
Right.
Like we're not going to literally import your avatar, but like you said, we know that you have this skin tone, this hairstyle, this type of face, and that kind of maps generally onto our versions of that. And
Almost
so
like
you get to kind of keep this
yeah,
experience going.
almost like it reminds me of the Mass Effect 1 to 2. You start Mass Effect 2 and it imports your character. I mean, it was, I don't know how many years between the games passed, but enough time the
Mm,
technology bumped up. And so it imported your character, but then you had a moment where you're like, well, hey, this is what we kind of came up with. Do you want to modify it? And then you could like tweak the
Yep.
values. But they made a guess that were like,
right.
oh, here's what you had before.
hmm
So that's interesting. Something to explore, and something maybe, two separate small developers who are building very different games. Maybe if they're friends or they like working together, they could make something like that, and maybe that could spread a kind of a movement of communities, like
hmm
like DSOP. We could decide, hey, let's all take our games that we're working on and make something usable between
Yep.
them.
Yep.
It could be fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean,
oh, go ahead, Storm.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like,
Oh,
kind of to wrap up, like the conversation, at least for now. I mean, it's a big one, but the hope is that we can get people to be just not negatively positioned without maybe a good reason to be, or at least
mhm,
consider that it's not a negative thing. Any kind of final thoughts or messaging that you think is helpful or useful to the community at large?
I think, like my personal motto these days, is that like, as developers, we control the computer, like we make computer do stuff. We're in charge of how it does things. And so being mindful as developers to not be limited by tools, like you can, just because it seems scary, you can make the things necessary to do the hard. Because the big critique I hear a lot is, developers will tell you like you can't do that. That's not how that works. It's like, no, we control computers. You can do it. You can make it happen. It'll be a hard work, but you'll do it. And just be like, if you want to be an advocate for metaverse stuff, be mindful of the tech stack and try to and do your best to kind of inform people, and not be unrealistic. And finally, just because the company Meta pitches really far out ideas, things that are like a few years down the road or seem unfeasible, doesn't mean that you have to do that to accomplish the metaverse. Like,
Yep.
it doesn't have to be an AR overlay in a VR space that also happens to be a coffee shop. That
Right.
isn't, just because that is a version of the metaverse does not mean that that has to be what the metaverse is. And because it's new, if you don't like the idea of it going one way, why don't you hop on in, boot up Unity, and make something,
Yeah,
contribute, shape the metaverse the way you want to see it.
absolutely. What are your final
Don't just say
thoughts?
no.
Right. Yeah. What are your final thoughts on the matter, Christian?
I really like the like the you can make it possible. I think my thing is be responsible about doing it.
Mhm.
Don't make anything like with malicious intent, obviously, and like think about your users and don't be mean to them.
Right. I think that's important too to help change the conversations to make cool stuff that isn't deceptive. Like
Yep.
that's
Yeah, it's
intended to
just
be good and
yep.
it gives value to people.
Be genuine.
Yeah. Yep. So wonderful. Yeah, I will second everything that was said and add that, we can craft ultimately video games, or we can craft tools, or we can craft sort of life enhancing experiences. It can be so many things. And so kind of to piggyback on Storm's point, what you see out there is just a sampling. The idea is this alternate space that's digitally focused. We went from use a username password to log in to using Google or Facebook to log in to, hey, use your alternate digital ego to log in, right? Is where we're headed now potentially. So it can mean a lot of things and it can be very cool as long as we're responsible. So with that said, Storm, thank you so much for the time joining us today. We'll have to bring you back on and talk about some projects as stuff you're working on gets released, because we definitely like to see work. Is there anything you would like to pitch or have someone check out? Like, how could someone find you if they want to talk to you? Anything like that?
Yeah, so off the bat, I'm an organizer for Society of Play, a Dallas-based nonprofit for game development. We like to kind of host a community and host events and kind of give back to local game developers and any game developer. We have a Discord server, so discord.gg/SOP, SOP, and you can hop on in. We do have policies. As long as you adhere to that, you're good to go. If you want to reach out to me directly, Twitter is a great place to do so. It's twitter.com/Storm Hughes, but the Hughes is Hues, like colors, haha. Other than that, no, I'm just making video games. I'm working on some projects, so when they get released, I would love to just have any and every excuse to tell everyone about them, but they're not quite ready yet, so I
Yeah,
have to,
yeah,
I
it's
have to
fun
stay
to.
hushed.
We've Most of the people we've talked to, they're in the midst of a project, so I'm eager for some of these releases, and we can show pretty screenshots and gameplay video and dive in. So it'll be fun. So
Yeah, I'm excited.
wonderful. Well, with that said, thank you everyone for watching. Of course, you can find us on all the kind of major podcast platforms. YouTube is what we recommend, because then you can see our beautiful faces and our screens and the stuff we talk about. So until next time, have a great day, everybody.
Bye.